Hello, and welcome to the 6th episode of the PharmD Diaries. I'm Angelica.
And I'm Hortensia.
And before we go any further with today's episode, we just wanted to take a second to celebrate because we are officially done with our P3 year. The last few weeks have been very draining, but we are so happy to be done. We will literally never have to take another final exam. We will be starting our 4th year rotations in the next week, so we're very excited for that and what this show will look like from that aspect. So anyway, this is the last part in our journey through pharmacy student organizations. The previous 2 parts covered pharmacy policy and advocacy, honor societies, professional fraternities, and student government. So please go listen to them if you haven't already.
For today's episode, if you couldn't tell from the title, we are going to be discussing a crucial topic that impacts students, professionals, and individuals everywhere: mental health. We really wanted to make sure we covered this topic to address things like burnout, anxiety, and imposter syndrome that plagues a lot of us, including myself.
Burnout, as defined by the Journal of Counseling Psychology, is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged and excessive stress, often related to work or academic environments. It typically involves feelings of overwhelming fatigue, a sense of detachment or cynicism towards one's work or studies, and a reduced sense of accomplishment. Burnout can manifest in many ways, including physical symptoms like headaches or sleep disturbances, emotional symptoms like irritability, anxiety, and depression, and behavioral changes like reduced performance and absenteeism.
On the other hand, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where individuals doubt their accomplishments and abilities, often attributing their successes to external factors such as luck. They may fear being exposed as a fraud or feel undeserving of their achievements, even if they have a track record of success. This self-doubt can lead to anxiety, stress, and a lack of confidence in one's abilities.
Navigating the demanding academic curriculum, clinical rotations, and personal responsibilities of pharmacy school can be challenging. So, we have 2 special guests who have graciously agreed to share their personal mental health journeys and how they have worked to prioritize their mental well-being. Hortensia got to interview our first guest, so I will pass it on to her.
Hello, everyone. I have P4 Shannyn joining us today, who's finishing up on her APPEs.
My name is Shannyn Gilchrist-Oates. I am a P4. I'm on my last block, so yay. After graduation, I will be doing a PGY1 at Phoenix Children's Hospital, so I'll be moving to Phoenix, Arizona come June.
How has the stress and pressure of pharmacy school impacted your mental well-being?
So I feel like it was a little different for me. I actually started pharmacy school online, and so that was a big learning curve, trying to go to classes and even organization meetings online. And so I felt like I wasn't able to not dissociate, but like separate school from home since everything happened in my home. And so it really impacted me a lot, especially my first year. But I ultimately ended up getting a dog, so that helped a lot. But it was definitely a learning curve for sure.
I definitely kind of understand you because I did experience towards the end of it, but I can't imagine how it was full time.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but we made it through.
And what are some self-care practices that you have incorporated in your routine that you can share with us?
So it definitely helped getting a dog, but obviously only do it if it's financially or you like dogs or maybe a cat. But other than that, I really used my Friday afternoons as I call them me days. So normally for our school, Fridays were exam days. And so once I submitted that exam, I forgot about school. I put on the back burner and I did stuff that I enjoyed, which was either like puzzles, watching my favorite show, watching a movie, reading. So I just made sure to do something that I enjoyed once that exam was over.
Yeah, I think that's very important to give you your me time.
Yeah, and I still do that. Like throughout, I started that P1 year, and then throughout the years, every Friday was a me day.
Some students work while they're in school. What are some strategies that you have tried in order to promote work-life balance and prevent burnout among pharmacy students?
Yeah, so I'm definitely one of those students. I was working since P1 year. I definitely encourage doing like that Friday, forgetting about work and school and just focusing on you and your mental health. But also, communication with your work is very important. I know for me, during my P1 year, I worked every weekend. And then I ultimately had to like communicate with my boss that it was just too much. And so I went from working every weekend to every other weekend. And that honestly really helped a lot because then I had a weekend to focus on school, but also I could use more me time in a sense. And then sometimes I did every Saturday. So then I had Sunday to kind of reset and recharge. And then I would work like during my school breaks if I felt like I could handle it. But basically, just communication with your boss and with yourself, listening to your body.
What steps do you think pharmacy school can take to promote a culture of mental wellness or at least reduce the stigma surrounding mental health issues?
Yeah, so I think just talking more about it, there definitely is still a stigma with mental health. I have anxiety and depression, and when I talk about it with people, a lot of the times they say, oh, it's in your head. So there is still that stigma, but I think the more we talk about it, the more people get comfortable with speaking about it, but also becoming self-aware that you are struggling. I think our school does a great job of it. We have a lot of mental health organizations on campus, but we also try to do a few mental health like events throughout the year, which has helped a lot. So I think that's something that a lot of colleges can start taking into account in their academic year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like there's a lot of faculty available if we ever need it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about our school is I've gone to so many faculty before and just like cried in their office. And I had one professor, I went through a lot in my second year with my mom being diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I was talking with her about it, she was like, okay, no, you need a few days. And so she pushed me to put in excused absence and take a few days to myself. So I really think that's a great quality in our school.
Could you share on how professional organizations can foster a supportive and inclusive environment that prioritizes the mental health and well-being of students?
Yeah, so I actually held a leadership position for mental health awareness chair for both our APHA and PDC organizations. And so when I was chair or co-chair, I really wanted to bring like a light to mental health. And so I made different flyers for every month about a different mental health, like either depression, anxiety, PTSD, things like that. So I think just focusing on more than just depression and anxiety, because there are a lot of other mental health diseases that are known, but then also just having those events. So, like for PDC, we do Pie the Professor, where students can donate money to Pie a professor eventually, and then we donate that to an organization. And so, just having that on campus and having people bring more light and more information about it I think will help a lot. And it's one step closer to ending that stigma that we talked about.
Awesome. And is there anything else you would like to share with our audience?
Just really listen to your body. If you feel fatigued or you're very overwhelmed, just take time away. It's okay to step away. And something that I learned, it's okay to say no. I know it's hard sometimes, but learning to say no or learning to like delegate if you need help, asking for help. So really get comfortable with that as well. I know it's hard. It's easier said than done, but just a little bit every day helps.
Yeah, I definitely can say that I struggle with asking for help and just acknowledging that I need to fix something like that.
Yeah. So definitely just taking time to yourself if you start to feel overwhelmed. And even if it's asking for help from a friend, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a professor or a therapist, but just a friend helps a lot.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much for all your insight and for taking the time to join us today on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We also wanted to give the perspective of one of our faculty members to talk about some of the common things that she has seen in regards to mental health as a professor, preceptor, and pharmacist. So please welcome Dr. Brittany Torres.
My name is Brittany Torres, and I have been at the college since 2017, so about 6.5, almost 7 years now. I am traditionally trained as an internal medicine pharmacist, but always knew I wanted to do academia as part of my career choice. I precept students in a local hospital here, Medical City Fort Worth Hospital, and take them on API internal medicine rotations. I co-precept with another faculty member for that. And then I recently started an assistant dean role. So I am now the assistant dean for pharmacy student success and well-being. And that role entails a lot of different things, including career preparation, student organizations, the student experience, professionalism, and soft skill development, which I hate to call soft skills now. I try to call them professional skills because they are hard skills that need to be learned, but people traditionally do call them soft skills. And then lastly, well-being, which is in my title.
One of the newer organizations on campus that you're an advisor for is Mental Health Matters. Can you explain to the audience what MHM is about and how it got started?
I would love to talk about this topic. It is interesting because we have a lot of student organizations currently on our campus, specifically within pharmacy. And these student organizations, while some of them did tackle mental health, it was more from the psychiatric side. So psychiatric pharmacists, how do they practice with a little bit of flavor of mental health? This organization is more about the mental health of our current students. And that's what's unique about it. And the reason it got started actually is because I teach in the P1 or first year course. It's called Professions and Skill Enhancement 1. And 2 years ago now, almost, I was doing well-being related talks. So I incorporate well-being into that. I talk about my own story and my own struggles while I'm in that course. And a group of students came up and had said they wanted to start an organization because they had researched a lot of the pharmacy student organizations we had and found that there was a gap and that there wasn't anything specifically to help them with their own mental health. And so that's how the idea began with Mental Health Matters. And that group has been working diligently now. They created the first student org related to this. And then they have been working really hard to try to create events and meaningful activities for students to do throughout the year this year, which was the first start of the organization's year.
So you are definitely one of the main professors that comes to mind when I think about emphasizing the importance of mental wellness while in school. What are some common mental health struggles that students have come to you about or that you noticed within yourself while you were in school?
So for me, I can talk a little bit about my story because I think that's really important for students to hear. So I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was in my first year of pharmacy school. And really what had happened was I had always been an athlete. So I was a collegiate athlete too and played collegiate sports. So I exercised upwards of 3 hours or more per day regularly in college. Came to pharmacy school and found that the rigors were very difficult and didn't think I had time to even work out anymore. And part of that, what I didn't realize at the time was my main coping strategy was significant exercise. And so without my main coping strategy that I had, I really spiraled and had a really difficult time, got diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and then started counseling, started going back and working out, and starting taking a lot better care of myself. And so I always talked with students in the first year about that because stopping your coping strategies or saying you don't have time for yourself can lead to some of these struggles and things down the road. I also think that it's important to talk about students who don't have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety. That's my journey and my diagnosis. But many students struggle with other things without a diagnosis. Something I see really commonly in students is perfectionism and fear of making mistakes or failing. That's probably the most common one that I see. I also see negative comparisons. So comparing themselves to other students and thinking negatively about themselves seems to be pervasive. And I think that's also part of the social media culture that we have developed over time. I also see students with family and friend relationship problems who want help with navigating some of those situations with family, friends that come up. And usually those are things that come up as a surprise. They're not quite sure or not anticipating this is going to happen. And then something in life happens that throws the balance off. Still also prevalent, but less common. I do see people who are starting medications for the first time who want to come and talk about it, who are starting their journey in therapy for the first time and wanting to talk a little bit about it. So I think I would see the wide gamut of different struggles from students, but there's a lot of different things and everyone has struggles. So I think it's important also to remember that mental health doesn't just mean diagnoses. Mental health also means some of the other struggles we have from day to day and maintaining our good mental health.
Some schools may not have mental health matters or any organization dedicated to mental health. Are there specific resources or support systems available within pharmacy schools to help students?
It really depends on the school as to what they have. However, I will say that ACPE, which is our accrediting body for pharmacy schools, so the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education, has a set of standards. And they have a few standards that are directly related to well-being. So one is standard 2.3 for health and wellness, which talks more about the patient. And it's more about how to make sure that you're helping a patient to manage their disease states and improve their health and well-being. Now, there also is a section 14.7 that's about student services and what is available as a student service. And things that are specifically called out as examples are things like tutoring support, which is for academics, but also faculty advising and what an advisor can offer, and counseling type services. So most colleges will have some level of advising and counseling type services, as is required by our accrediting body. But the variety that you're going to see may be different depending on where you are.
You have mentored several students, including myself, and you also serve as a preceptor, like you mentioned, for APPY rotations. What role can mentors and preceptors play in promoting the mental well-being of students?
I'm extremely passionate about this because this is where I think most of the difference that we can make in student lives really lies. A lot of times we think about students and their academic performance, but what is hindering maybe their growth in their academic performance 99 times out of 10 is a well-being related issue. And if we don't tackle and talk to students like human beings, then we will not help them the best that we can to achieve their goals in their careers and in their time while they're here with us at the College of Pharmacy. So I think this is really important. The one thing I do want to say is that most faculty and staff are not trained to be counselors. So I cannot counsel students in my role. I am not trained to do that. I will encourage students, depending on the situation, to go see a professional counselor. And there are many barriers to this. Some students may not want to do that, but that is sometimes what I do recommend to students if something is kind of out of my league. But if it's not out of my league, we have tons of discussions about well-being. I think vulnerability is the biggest key here. Students put faculty on a pedestal, whether you think about it that way or not. They don't think about how some of us have failed exams. Actually, all of us have probably failed exams as faculty members. They don't assume that. They assume that you got straight A's while you were in school. Showing vulnerability and showing students what it really looked like when you were in school and what it really looks like now is extremely important. Showing students that you make mistakes, that you struggle, all of that is extremely important, and talking openly as a preceptor about well-being with students. So something that I do is I discuss my own struggles. I teach them coping strategies. That's not necessarily required for a preceptor, but it's something that can be really helpful to mimic your own coping strategies and show them what works for you. It may not work for them, but demonstrating that for them can be really helpful. Also, when giving feedback, addressing their internal beliefs about themselves. Often we give feedback and we talk about behaviors and we talk about performance. But like I said, most of the time, what's affecting that student's performance is something entirely related to their belief systems about themselves. And so tackling those belief systems with the students can be really empowering. And the students can start to realize over the course of a rotation that they are holding themselves back. It's their mind, the way they think. Our brains are wired to be nasty and dirty to ourselves. We wouldn't say some of these things to anyone else, but tackling the way that students feel specifically about themselves and what they believe about themselves is extremely important. The last thing I want to say is preceptors' words hold a lot of power. I think as preceptors and as mentors, it's important that we're realistic with students, that we give them critiques, but the way we communicate it is extremely important. We have a lot of power, but kindness and understanding are very important while you are delivering information and feedback to a student, especially providing critiques. I believe that many students in this new generation are able to accept feedback. They're just looking for you to do it in a kind way.
Burnout has become quite a prevalent issue that a lot of us struggle with. How can pharmacy students and professionals recognize signs of burnout, and what steps can be taken to prevent or mitigate those issues?
So the Maslow burnout scale is the gold standard type scale to assess the presence of burnout. So you can always take that scale and see where you are and where you land on it. That would be the gold standard way to determine whether you are experiencing burnout or not. There are three kind of main prongs to burnout: energy exhaustion, so feeling very exhausted or depleted; increased mental distance from one's job, so feeling like you are not as involved and not as interested in your job. You're kind of, my job's over here and I'm in this other area in my brain and I can't be with my job. And the other one is feeling cynicism or negativism towards one's job. And you can substitute job for academics, whatever it is that you're working through. So those are the three main ones. What I think is really important for students and for professionals, I think about it as like a prodrome. So a prodrome is like an early symptom indicating the development of a disease. I think of this as identifying your prodrome, if you will, of burnout. So how do you find the symptoms that are saying, hey, I'm starting to go down this burnout pathway, and you identify it early and then make adjustments early. So some of this takes a lot of self-reflection and identification. Also, as part of that self-reflection, we can't always control everything around us. We can only control certain things. So when you're thinking about your own burnout, it's important to think about what's under your locus of control. So what about my life can I control that is either contributing positively or negatively to burnout? How can I increase the things that are positively contributing? How can I potentially decrease the things that aren't contributing, either negatively or aren't contributing at all, that are a waste of time, like scrolling through social medias, watching television, those types of things. So I think that also developing, kind of like I just talked about, healthy coping skills. I've seen an increase in the number of students who decide to skip class or they skip assignments to deal with their burnout. That's their coping strategy. That strategy isn't going to work as well. Unfortunately, the field of pharmacy has not adjusted to allow for flexibility, especially in the clinical areas where you're expected to be there certain times each day. And calling out from API rotations or work is not a sustainable solution for coping with stress and burnout. So I think part of that early identification is trying to get at these things early and make personalized adjustments and healthier coping skills that are not, I'm just going to put this away for the day. We have to learn how to deal with what we are currently going through.
So there are some students that work. It could be by choice because we want to learn about the professional field or for financial reasons. What are some effective strategies for promoting work-life balance and preventing burnout among pharmacy students?
So I do want to say one thing, and it seems like it's silly and maybe semantics, but work-life balance is not a term that we use at the college, at least when we're talking about our faculty and our staff well-being. We call it the work-life journey instead, because balance is nearly impossible. There are some times where you're going to have very busy times at work or potentially less busy times at work or in your academics. Same goes for our lives, right? We can't control the random things that happen in our lives. There might be really busy times, things we didn't anticipate, and there might be less busy times. And so balance sometimes becomes difficult to achieve. So the journey, I think, as a word, helps you to think about how not every part is going to be smooth. We're not going to live our lives 100% smoothly all the time. There are stressors, there are things that are going to be difficult sometimes, and then there are going to be times that are fantastic, that aren't as difficult or that are easier. But I really think prevention here in terms of promoting work-life journey and preventing burnout is key. I see a lot of hospital pharmacy departments, even student organizations, doing things like, let's plan this social event after we all take this stressful exam, and that's our coping strategy. That's reactive. And so you see a ton of people doing reactive strategies. They say, let's plan this social, let's do this. They don't get at the meat of what's really going on with burnout. They don't teach people the real skills and the real things to kind of help with that. And so even though those social events and different things are great, one thing I love about the Mental Health Matters organization is that they're starting to teach people some of the proactive strategies that you can do to prevent burnout as opposed to reactive type strategies. And my answer here is really not the sexy things that you see for well-being. You know, the well-being industry is a $1 billion industry, but a lot of those things don't have data demonstrating they're actually going to help you. Most of the stuff is free. So the first is exercise. Regular exercise is just as or more effective at decreasing anxiety symptoms, mild to moderate depression, stress, than meds or therapy. So that's huge. If we can create a regular exercise schedule, that can be one great way to prevent burnout. Adequate nutrition is another one, making sure you eat enough vegetables, especially fruits and vegetables. Adequate sleep is a huge one. And energizing social interaction. I say energizing because some people think all social interaction is not energizing. So you may have extroverts and introverts. An example would be I'm an extrovert, my husband's an introvert, but my husband still has a small circle of people that do energize him when he socially interacts with him. When you are experiencing burnout or trying to prevent burnout, having that circle and those social interactions are very important. So I think, just because you're introverted doesn't mean that social interaction is not energizing, but thinking about what's energizing to you. Is it going to be energizing to go out to the bars all night long on a Saturday night when you have to study all day on Sunday? Probably not. So maybe you say no to that one, but instead you get a nice dinner, or you say, hey, I'll go to dinner beforehand, but I'm not going to go out afterwards. I'll do this energizing thing, have that time, and then be ready. And so I think a lot of it is about intentionality in your exercise, nutrition, sleep, social interaction. And sometimes that feels really difficult to do because you're trying to tackle maybe all of these things that you need help with. I suggest tackling the one that will help you the most, thinking about that. For me, if I exercise, I will get better sleep and I would generally eat better. That's my personal thing. So I know if I tackle exercise as my goal of what I need to do, the others will sort of follow suit. I get the most bang for my buck, if you will. And you can think about that too. Is there one or some of these that will help to energize you enough to be able to maybe do some of these other things? Then that can be a great thing to do. The other thing I do want to mention, and this is different because this isn't something necessarily that my generation had to deal with, but almost 50% of Generation Z lives paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford a house, sometimes can't even afford rent. So part of also having a prevention strategy for burnout is going to be dealing with financial well-being. So part of that is going to be budgeting, significantly learning how to budget. They don't teach you how to budget in school. They don't teach us how to do that in our elementary, middle schools, colleges even. They don't teach you how to budget. So learning the process of how to budget is extremely important. because you want to be able to live comfortably enough to not have to worry about that. If that becomes a worry, then all of these other things fall out of place. And so our college has been trying to tackle this. I know that many other colleges of pharmacy are trying to tackle financial well-being too, but learning how to budget can help significantly with your ability to cope with what's currently going on. It'll help you to be able to flex if you need to spend more money at some point, if your tire blows out and while you're driving, those types of things that can incur significant stress. Budgeting is going to be very important, and learning how to do some cost saving measures too.
How has the transition from pharmacy school to professional practice impacted the mental health and well-being of new graduates? And are there any resources available to get them through this transition period?
I think that the transition is difficult. It's very difficult. The data among well-being in pharmacists, by and large, the group that is the most burned out and the most stressed is new practitioners, people who are just coming out into the workforce upon graduation. So knowing that is really important, and finding resources available to help through that transition period. I did residency. It's been a while, so I did a PGY1 and a PGY2 residency. At that time, well-being was not discussed as much. Now, residencies are required by ASHP, who is the accrediting body for many of the residencies. They require well-being aspects to be implemented. They require resources. And so asking questions of those programs about what they provide and what they have can help to glean maybe some that might have more robust well-being type offerings, and also care a little bit maybe more about your mental health as you move forward. And that's just an aside because I have residency experience. But any non-residency jobs, there are many national and local pharmacy organizations that offer well-being tips and strategies. Specifically, ASHP and APHA over the last few years have developed a major focus on well-being within the profession. And as part of that, you will see tons of resources on their websites and things that can help with well-being. But I think really the most important thing to do, and this is proven by data, the most important thing to do when you are starting off new is to have a mentor. Those who have a mentor are less likely to experience burnout and stress. So finding a mentor, and that mentor can be outside of your institution, inside your institution. I usually recommend both, because someone outside your institution you can talk to about a lot of different things maybe than you feel comfortable talking to someone inside your institution. And finding that mentor who can help you to bridge your career path, who can help to normalize things that are difficult, that can help you with some imposter syndrome, and also on furthering your career, can be extremely beneficial in thwarting the high burnout numbers among new practitioners.
And what do you think contributes to this struggle amongst new practitioners?
You're just getting started. So as someone just getting started, you see significant imposter syndrome because you go one day you're a student and the next day you're a pharmacist. And that's a big transition. I can remember the first order that I verified as a resident. I mean, it was Tylenol. And I was checking it so closely, and it was not, that big of a deal type order. And I was so nervous about it. The transition can be difficult in terms of imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I was a student yesterday. Today I'm a pharmacist. There's not really an in-between. You're one, then you're the other. And so there's a lot of mental strain that is caused by that, worrying about whether you're meant to be here, whether you're really an imposter sitting here. Do you deserve being here because you don't know this or that? There's a learning curve when you start. So as a college of pharmacy, we're responsible for getting students prepared to go out and practice, but we don't have you prepared for every single career pathway and everything you need to know off the bat. It's not possible. So you're going to walk out of there needing a learning curve to learn information depending on where you are and in what job. And so that leads to significant imposter syndrome. And so having a mentor that can help to guide you through all of it, where you should be going, what you should be trying to do to improve yourself, can be really helpful and can also help you to change your mindset about how well you're doing, because a lot of us would feel like we're not doing as well during that new practitioner phase. That's how I felt too.
Even imposter syndrome starts in school too. Sometimes you just feel like, oh, should I still be here?
Exactly. And it doesn't go away. I mean, I just started a new leadership position and now I have imposter syndrome there. So throughout your life, learning how to deal with being an imposter, my biggest thing is mentorship. It has helped me significantly to have someone outside of the institution also to look at everything that I'm doing and give me feedback has been really crucial in helping me to also see myself as other people see me, because I only see myself as I see me.
How has the demanding nature of the pharmacy profession affected your mental health as a practicing pharmacist?
This, I think, really came to a head during the pandemic for me. My mental health has waxed and waned throughout the time that I've been practicing since graduating as a pharmacy student, but it was definitely an all-time low during the pandemic. I even lost empathy during that time. I found that I was not able to demonstrate empathy for patients who had come in with COVID-19. That was really difficult for me because I had never experienced a lack of empathy before, and I really had to work on myself independently to be able to gain that back. Part of that was actually regular meditation, loving kindness meditation specifically, where you demonstrate kindness towards others and you express kindness towards others during the meditation, as well as to yourself. I had to do that to help restore my empathy and my emotional side back. That was a really difficult time. So I would say that was probably the worst. But since then, I've learned how to adjust a little bit. The other thing I struggle with is learning how to demonstrate empathy. That's natural to me. But learning how to demonstrate empathy while still putting the lid on the empathy so that it doesn't come home with me. So that one's difficult because I am a natural kind of empathetic person. And so when I see a situation or a struggle or something, sometimes I have the tendency to bring those emotions home with me, even though those emotions really should stay for my own benefit and the benefit of my family too, at work. And that's something I still work through, probably because I did not feel like I had anyone to talk to when I was in pharmacy school or when I was going through my mental health struggles. I want to help everyone so badly, but I also have to remember that I have to be able to put a lid on that to be able to live my life too. So I think that's my unique experience in terms of the demands of the pharmacy profession, but everyone's going to be different based on what they've experienced.
You mentioned meditation. What are some other self-care practices that you have incorporated into your routine, and how have they changed over time?
I really, over the pandemic, I talked about how I had lost empathy and I really had to recharge and do something about my own mental health. There have been different periods in my life where I've gone through times where I've said I need to restart, come to the drawing board and work on myself. And during the pandemic was one of them. So during that pandemic, I went and listened to tons of podcasts. I did lots of free Coursera courses. I really learned a lot about self-care practices, well-being, all different types of things related to the well-being type field. And as part of that, I gained a whole laundry list of potential coping skills. And those are actually coping skills I teach students as a preceptor too. But I've tried a lot of them out. The idea is to try them. If you like them, keep them. If you hate them, throw them away and never do them again. So some of the ones that I do regularly, daily gratitude with my husband. Before we go to bed, we both would say things that we are grateful for. It takes like 3 minutes, maybe at the most. 3 things we're most grateful for in that day. And if you're having a really bad day and all you can think of is the grass was green, that is what you're thankful for. And that's what helps you the next day and the next day and the next day to even start noticing the world around you. That was one that really impacted me significantly. The other thing I started was a wind down procedure. I feel like a lot of us wind up during the day. We don't jump out of bed running around, we wind up, but then we forget we also have to wind down before bed. So something I do is I try to turn my phone off an hour before bed. I do light stretching. I'll journal. So sometimes I'll journal what I plan to eat and what I plan to do the next day. And if I look at my schedule, say it's a work day, and I look at my schedule and I don't have anything exciting, I plan something that excites me for the next day. That helps me to start thinking more positively and to look forward to the things that I have in my day. The journaling takes me maybe 5 minutes, so very quick. Meditation in the morning can be very helpful, and I meditate 5-10 minutes at the very most. So you'll notice something that I've learned is that if I sit here and say I'm going to do well-being for 3 hours, it's never going to happen. I do very small snippets that are reasonable to incorporate that make me feel better. So the most bang for my buck. So meditating 5 to 10 minutes in the morning allows me to start my day without jumping out of bed and running around, because that's what I tend to do if I don't wake up early and do that. Another strategy that I have used with students is called the WHOOP strategy, and that's Dr. Duckworth's research specifically. It is a strategy for how to increase the likelihood that you will achieve your goals. So we often tell students to make SMART goals, but we don't tell them how are you more likely to achieve this goal. This is a motivational strategy that also creates an if-then plan around your obstacles that can really be helpful. That's something that I do from time to time, especially if I want to get up early, since I'm not a morning person, to do something other than just get up and go right to work.
I really appreciated the WHOOP method for helping me create plans around obstacles that I may face when I'm trying to achieve my goal. It's really taught me to think outside the box and finding alternative ways to achieve those goals. So, I highly recommend using the WHOOP strategy if you have a hard time keeping up with any goals or resolutions. In what ways can pharmacists contribute to destigmatizing mental health issues and promoting a culture of openness and support within healthcare settings?
I have very strong feelings about this one because a lot of mental health care that's happening, we say that's okay for the patient to have, but that's not okay for us to have. Our patients can have that and we can treat our patients, but we're not allowed to have that as pharmacists or healthcare providers. I think that is a really dangerous notion that we really need to destigmatize, because if you look at the percentage of the population who struggles with mental health related disorders, naturally, many of them are going to be healthcare providers. You can't avoid it. It's not like all of our healthcare providers don't have mental health disorders. I think openness around that is really important, and acceptance around that, knowing that many of us as healthcare providers do have that, and being open is extremely important. It should not be we take care of people like this, but we aren't like this, because that just contributes again to the stigma of mental health related disorders, and also doesn't allow us to admit when we have significant problems. We can talk about burnout and stress in the pharmacy field. That seems to be not taboo anymore. Now people are speaking out about that, but I still don't see a lot of people speaking out about mental health related disorders that are not burnout and stress, things like anxiety, depression, those types of things. You're not seeing as much of that. And so I think it's really important for us to talk openly about those things.
What are some methods that you have found help you de-stress?
I think the main thing that I like to talk about when it comes to stress is, especially when I talk to students about it, I say, okay, what do you do to de-stress? And students will say, well, I go for a run, or I exercise this, or I go home and walk my dog. And they have these strategies that are all things that you can't do in the moment. So I say, okay, you're about to step on to give a presentation. Are you going to go for a run? And they sort of chuckle. And I say, okay, what do you do in the moment? And a lot of students blank stare. There's nothing. They don't know what to do in the moment. But a lot of our anxieties come from being in the moment, not just things that we do. So we have the proactive and reactive type things. So it's strange when you talk about stress, most students say, okay, I go and I do this, I go and I do that. I think a more proactive approach with exercise, nutrition, sleep is beneficial. But then also knowing that there's things in the moment to do to stop the stress. Because what I found, again, I've already talked about how Sometimes we see people skipping classes or skipping rotation or skipping these things because they don't know how to cope or have that coping strategy to help you get through the day. And I'm not talking about situations where maybe a family member has died, right? Those things are different. Those are more extreme type things, but you have stress on the rotation related to something you're doing. And dealing with that stress and part of processing through that stress is in real-time coping strategies. So I also like to talk about breathing. That tends to be the one that students can relay to me a little easier. So box breathing. So you breathe 4 seconds very slowly in. You hold your breath slowly for 4 seconds. And then you breathe out slowly for 4 seconds. And you repeat that. That helps with the physiologic symptoms of stress. So higher heart rate, blood pressure, that'll help to bring that down. There are some other ones. I really like scents. So if you have a calming scent, so I use the eucalyptus scent that I really like sometimes. I also have a scent that reminds me of my grandmother because it was the lotions that she would have in her home when I would go visit for vacation. And so those really help to calm me down. No one knows what you're doing if you have a scent that you use in the moment that can help to calm you down. There's other things like that in the moment, but I think that acute stress is something that is often neglected to think about and is just as important to make sure that you can cope through what's going on.
Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
The only other thing is if you were looking for potential resources, sometimes I get questions about what podcasts to listen to, or I get questions about what courses to do or books to read or things like that. The How of Happiness is a really wonderful book. That's one, I think another College of Pharmacy actually uses that to go through that book. What I really like about this book is it's science-based. And so it talks about science-based proven strategies to increase happiness. And their data for happiness comes from twin studies. So they have twins that are genetically the same who have been removed from each other or are living with each other. And so the data comes from there, and they talk about all different strategies that can improve happiness. And then The Science of Well-Being by Laurie Santos was a Coursera course that I had taken that was excellent. That is one of the ones that I did during the pandemic. And she also has podcasts, Laurie Santos, that are really great to listen to as well. I also did a Coursera course, Resilience During a Time of Uncertainty. This was meant to be before the pandemic, but it was really excellent. It doesn't necessarily have to be pandemic based. This one talks a lot about developing resilience and optimism, even for those who are less optimistic at baseline, like me, and has a lot of study information too. And that's by University of Pennsylvania. They tend to be one of the leaders in types of well-being sciences too, and optimism specifically. So that was a great course that I took as well. Brene Brown is one of my other favorite people to follow. She has a podcast called Unlocking Us that's really interesting as well. Also, all of her books are great. But you have to find what works for you. Those are things that I like personally, but there are some things that others may like differently. So I encourage you to go out and research and see what's out there and what speaks to you specifically.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. A big thank you to Shannyn Gilchrist-Oates and Dr. Brittany Torres for sitting down with us and emphasizing the importance of mental health and wellness. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed our journey through the pharmacy student experience, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support means the world to us. If you have any questions, topics you'd like us to cover, or if you want to share your own PharmD story, feel free to reach out via email at diariespharmd@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at PharmD Diaries Podcast. Remember, you are not alone on this journey, so take care, study hard, and keep chasing your pharmacy dreams.
Bye.
Bye.